Welcome back to Petty Astrology. I'm your host, Kaycee Felton-Lui, and we're in it, folks. We are in it. Mercury is retrograde in the sign of Virgo. We have Venus in Virgo right now, and for me, it's felt like getting down to brass tacks, taking care of business. And if you're anything like me, these past few months have been a lot. There's a lot going on in the world. We have Pluto in Aquarius right now. It's inching back towards Capricorn, where it's going to be in the fall. And the universe is getting us ready. It's asking us to get our shit together. And sometimes that's frustrating, but when you've been going and going and going, we do need moments to catch our breath and catch up. So for me, that has looked like looking at my health, making some decisions about COVID prevention supplies that I've purchased, also moving my body more, because when you get busy, it's very easy for that part of the routine to kind of fall off. And for spiritual people, like a lot of the people who listen to this podcast, it's very easy for us to look at the physical parts of our lives and kind of despiritualize them. Like for me, I'm a very mental person, so, moving my body, exercising, I know intellectually, very important, like crucial for my mental health, for my physical health, all of the above. But, when I am swamped with work, producing the podcast, readings, all things I love, but they do take a lot of time and energy, some of that other stuff can kind of fall by the wayside. And I do notice that, my spiritual health does take a hit when I'm not taking care of my body in the way that I'd like to be. So maybe if you're anything like me, you found yourself kind of going back over some stuff that you've fallen off on. And it's really nice, actually, because with Mercury being retrograde, but also having Venus in Virgo right now, I feel like this is actually a little bit of a gift. It's a little bit of a gentler Mercury retrograde in Virgo, because this transit is asking us to invite more ease. So, for me, maybe it's just like taking more walks, because that's a form of exercise. It's not super high commitment. I get out in the world, it relaxes me. It also helps me write a lot. Like I get a lot of ideas when I'm just in a relaxed state on my walks. So it's, my overproductive Capricorn moon brain just loves to multitask at all times. So, I'm finding different solutions and revisiting things that I know work for me, but, I haven't been able to make the right amount of time for. So maybe you have some things like that in your life, some routine stuff, some self-care stuff, some work stuff even, that you are catching up on. And maybe in that process, instead of just slogging through it, you can find ways to incorporate more ease. Venus is not a sign of pushing. It's letting things kind of fall in place. It's cultivating an energy that invites the results that you want. And so when we can approach things with a little bit more ease and a mindset that just because we're taking care of business, it doesn't have to be unpleasant, it doesn't have to be hard, it doesn't have to be the worst thing ever. And in fact, maybe we could find ways to enjoy it. You might just find that things come together a little bit better in a way that's a little bit more satisfying for you. So even despite the Mercury retrograde annoyances and delays and frustrations, I know that we all have the opportunity to move through August in a way that we come out the other side in a much better space. Today on the podcast, I'm answering your questions. These are questions that patrons submitted to me, about Petty Astrology, the vision I have for the space, and the community around it. Then stick around for a look at the astrology of the week ahead, including that Mars-Jupiter conjunction everybody's been talking about. I was recently catching up on some older episodes of Kendall Ford's podcast, It Really Is That Deep, because they've been taking a break. And so I was like, this is a good time for me to catch up on the stuff that I missed before I knew about this podcast. And they did an episode early on where, they just talked about themselves. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in season 3 of my podcast and I've never done that. Scorpio Mercury. So I figured that it was probably time for me to get a little bit more personal, which as a Scorpio Mercury, it's not the first thing that I do in any situation, even on my own damn podcast. So thank you to patrons for submitting some really great questions. I'm going to try to get through as many of them as possible. We'll see how long I talk. Let's see what we can do. So first question comes from Zach. Are you still working in TV/film as a writer? Do you have any exciting stuff you are working on? So the answer to this, as is often the case in the entertainment industry, is yes and no. Yes and no. And the reason for that is because being in this industry is very unstable work for many people, because you get a gig. Depending on the gig, you work on it for, a few months, maybe longer if you're lucky. And then, either the gig is recurring if it's like a TV thing, or it's over. It could get canceled. You could get not hired back. There could be any number of things happening. And if you guys remember, people who have been with me for a minute now, 2023, I was on strike for 5 months. And a lot of that was during the summer. So, picketing in like full-blown summer heat is not it. It's not my favorite thing to be doing, but we had some real issues in the industry that, were causing it to not really be a viable career. And it already is. It's a rough industry. In fact, when I got into the union that I went on strike with last year, I got an email from them and they said, congratulations, you've made it. And the likelihood of you making it into this union was actually less likely than you being a Major League Baseball player, statistically. And I was like, holy shit, and I knew it was hard. I am from Los Angeles. I didn't grow up with like industry parents or anything like that. So it wasn't something that I knew everything about. I just knew I wanted to create. I wanted to write television. I love television. I love film. And, as often we do when we're young, I was never told that I wasn't going to get the things I want the most, Chapel Roan. I was one of those kids that was just like, whatever I wanted to do, my family was like, yeah, you could do that. And I'm really lucky for that. That's one of the best things I could say about my childhood and the way I was raised. But yeah, so it's already an unstable industry. And then, of course, we're rounding out Pluto in Capricorn right now. We have a little bit of time left with that transit in the fall, right around election time. Very fun stuff. I told you, 2024. It's a big year. It's a transitory year. But all this to say, if we look around the world right now, a lot of us are in industries that are changing very dramatically, and the entertainment industry is no different. And in fact, there's some really great articles that have been written about the industry right now, and there are literally people leaving Los Angeles because they can't get work. They haven't gotten work in a very long time, and it's not just writers, it's not just actors. There are so many people that do the editing, the sound mixing, the special effects, the crew work, the labor of like building these sets and actually making the things that we see on screen happen. And the industry, in my opinion, has largely retaliated for that 5-month strike that the writers were on last year. And then, we had the actors join us on strike as well for a little bit less of a long slog as we did. But, nevertheless, a lot of striking happened in 2023. And the industry is like, oh, we don't have any money. And, you can look into all of the investments and like where the money in Hollywood comes from. It's like a lot of industries where, these big players are just funneling a lot of money into it, pumping a lot of money into it. And that's kind of like what has happened over the past while with the entertainment industry. There was so much TV. I'm sure you guys, for people that view TV, like there's a million shows. It's almost a joke how many TV shows there were. It's not the case anymore. And I have a lot of thoughts about how this industry is changing, and perhaps we can talk about that another time if you guys are interested in hearing me talk about it. Of course, we have a suggestion box, by the way, in Patreon. If you guys ever hear me talk about something and you want me to go into it more, or there's just something that you're curious about, that's what it's for. I want to hear from you guys. But this industry, like many industries, ain't what it used to be. It's changing. And if you hear that tip-tapping around, that's my dog. And this is a good episode for me to just let her do her thing, because this is what my life is like. I have a Chihuahua that runs my life. She's 13. We do what she wants most of the time, but she does not respect my work. She's coming over to stare at me to attempt to get some food out of me. But it's like almost midnight. We're done with that part of the day, my love. But anyways, sorry, Zach, I'm going to get back to your question because it's a really good one. So as an example, there's been a couple jobs that have come up for me in the past year that have been possibilities for me. And then just something or another keeps changing. Like the studio that was going to make one of the shows completely changed how they were doing the hiring, meaning they were just going to hire way less people because it's a lot cheaper for them to do that. So that opportunity didn't pan out for me. I also am, as far as I know, still in the running for a pretty big job, and it's a show that has won awards. It's part of that universe, and I really am interested in this job, but it's because the industry is the way that it is right now. My agent described it as a knife fight out there. So it's, as you can imagine, an enormously competitive industry. And like I said, a lot of us have not worked, the way that we want to work for a long time. And now, to get a little woo-woo about it, as has happened to me since I've been an astrologer, I feel like the universe has really orchestrated things in a way where astrology has become really a major focus of everything. And obviously I've brought this podcast back and am doing it in a very different way than my, experimental first season, which, if you are new, it was about Love Island. It was me, Mackenzie Wollenseen, and Jen Russell just enjoying our Love Island interest and using it to play with astrology and go deeper and, do some predicting and synastry. And we just were having fun. But the fact that I haven't had a job, because those writing jobs, when I get a job like that, it's very, very demanding. Very demanding. Usually, it just takes up a lot of your time, and, there's a lot of brainstorming and research and meeting and writing and revising and notes, and, maybe you get to go to set and you film things. So it can become very overwhelming very quickly. So in some ways, I'm grateful that I haven't had those opportunities pop up, because it's directed me to really double down on what I want to do here with Petty Astrology. And, this podcast means a lot to me. And I feel like this is something that is meant to grow. And it seems to me that the universe is really pushing me to grow it. So one of the things that I think about how the entertainment industry is changing is that because people like me, we aren't able to get the jobs that used to be still rare, but there were a lot more. I have heard, I don't know if this is a true statistic, but I've heard something like 70% of the writers union is out of work right now. So I know it's not just me. Very Pluto and Aquarius vibes. I could sit in my apartment and be like, oh my God, everybody hates me. I'm not good enough for this industry. And I've done that when I was younger. It's very easy to get into that thought spiral. But this is a systemic issue. There's a lot of really talented, really creative people right now that aren't being employed by the studio system. So what does that mean? We got a bunch of unemployed creative people that need to pay their bills, me included. And we have skills, and things that we're passionate about, things that we're good at. So we're going to end up applying those elsewhere. And for me, regardless of whether or not I get that writing job, like I'm continuing to build this platform for myself and for the people that listen to my work and the clients that I have, because it's that important to me. And I love what I am able to do with astrology. So I don't think that I'll ever not be a screenwriter because I love it. It's really funny. I had a thriving career before I became an astrologer. So it wasn't like I was looking for something else, but it's been kind of beautiful the way that I've been able to meld them together and do something that I've not seen done before. And I'm excited to keep growing it. And, I have a lot of skills that I've gotten from it's been over 12 years in television industry. So, I know I look young, but I've been around the block, and I'm not new to the entertainment industry, and I've learned a lot from that experience, and I want to apply it as much as possible to what I'm doing here. So to answer your question, yes and no. Yes and no. I'm not employed working on anything right now. I have a million ideas for scripts that I want to write. I have a script that I've been working on for a while, and it's a fun one. I've kind of set it aside though, because I'll be honest with you, Zach, and everybody else listening, not working for those 5 months on strike and then, continuing to be underpaid and underemployed. Everything's very expensive right now, and I don't come from family money or anything like that. Like it's me. So I really don't have the luxury of like shifting my focus and putting a bunch of time into a screenplay that might circulate in the industry and maybe somebody will buy, you know what I mean? Like, and honestly, right now, I would rather give my energy to what I'm doing for you guys, because I feel like it matters more than me writing a script that might not seem the light of day for like, years and years. And hopefully I get paid from it, if that makes sense. You do a lot of free work in entertainment before you see a dime, and it's not it. It's not it. It's one of the reasons why so many people in this industry are like really burnt out. And yeah, I want to build what I'm doing with Petty Astrology because I would rather have a direct relationship with the audience versus like being mediated through the studio system. And not that I won't do it again. I'm sure, like I know that I will be. I'm not giving up on the industry. It's just right now, this is where my energy is. This is what's growing. This is what feels important to me. So thank you for that question. It's probably a much longer answer than you anticipated. All right, this question is from Mimi. So how are you continuing your astrology studies in this season of life? Where do you hope to expand your knowledge and expertise? Okay, so right now studying astrology for me, it completely all revolves around my production schedule for this podcast. And so I do a lot of like reading in between me doing other things. Very Gemini Mars of me. It's like I'm spinning a bunch of different plates at the same time. And I also look at charts often, like in the evenings when I'm just kind of lounging. And to get better at astrology, you really have to like live it, and you're just kind of constantly taking in information and observing. And so I try to do it as much as possible because that's how you get better at it. I want to get better at how I speak about more collective astrology. So that's something that I practice a lot with this podcast because a lot of my job is translation. Like I'm looking at the energy and trying to put it in words, and also trying to put it in words for a general group of people that all have different charts. So it's actually really challenging to do that and to do it in a way people can understand. So I want to get a lot better at that, and that comes with practice. I do have an interest in going deeper with mundane astrology, but my caveat with that is that I don't think that I'm ever going to be the kind of astrologer that is going to be like, Thursday we might have an earthquake, or, like, I don't think I'm going to be sitting down and trying to be like, oh, this is exactly what's going to happen on this day very often, because personally, I have found it like to not be that helpful in my life, like to kind of get caught up in like what's going to happen, what's going to happen. And, no shade to people who are interested in that, but my primary concern with astrology is like how do I help people liberate themselves as much as possible and live more authentically? And to me, that has zero to do with us like continuing to fit ourselves into the capitalist imperialist system that we live in. I want people to be empowered to help break themselves out of that and help move us collectively forward, as human beings, because I think that's where we're at. And that's why I talk about Pluto and Aquarius so much, because I think that we have this big opportunity to make these big strides. And it's important to me to be like an agent for that change, I guess. So my focus is really on finding ways to do that better and going deeper with my studies on that level. And, I'm also looking at offering some more services because I really like working with people in smaller groups or one-on-one. And I want to give people some more options of like how we can do that. Maybe I've been thinking about doing some like astrology coaching, which would essentially be like monthly sessions with me where we kind of revisit your transits and we can kind of work on, what you've got going on. And I think that those would be like 3 or 4 month packages. But things like that. I want to find creative ways to work with people because the collective is made up of individuals. So I feel like the more of us that are out there feeling empowered, the better, because I know it's like kind of corny sounding, but I think it has a ripple effect. And I really bet on that with everything that I do. I'm like, okay, well, if I can create a space to practice astrology, to build community around astrology, and we can help support one another and grow together, imagine the ripple effect that's going to happen in each one of our, real lives, our offline lives, whatever you want to call it, because those community relationships, those, online connections, which is a lot of the way that I work with clients, those are very real. They have a massive impact. So yeah, working on growing as a predictive astrologer so that I can help individuals and also help us get free collectively. And then of course, diving into mundane astrology because I have a feeling that I'll find ways to use that for our benefit too. Here's a question from Elena. I'm curious about how mediumship has shaped your spirituality and if taking mediumship classes has enhanced your life in ways you weren't expecting. Absolutely. Yeah. Mediumship has definitely changed my life. I started studying mediumship in spring of 2023, and it was completely an intuitive draw to take it. And my purpose was to just develop my intuition. That was really it. I was like, that would be a helpful skill to develop as an astrologer. It'll make me more aware of what I'm capable of and how to work with my intuition. And that was my goal. I really didn't even go into it to like do mediumship. I was like, oh, would be cool, I guess. But like I had zero expectation that I was going to go in and do mediumship, which is just kind of funny. My mentor for mediumship is medium Carrie Wilson, who's been on this podcast before. And she's a character. She's a really amazing teacher, but she kind of just threw us in just to see what we could do. And lo and behold, I could do mediumship, and I really didn't know that. And so that was a pleasant surprise. And it's definitely opened me up to what's possible for myself because I really never, much like never would have saw myself become an astrologer, never would have saw myself become a medium. So it has given me a lot of confidence because as I've been working with my intuition more specifically in the past, year and a half, I have become a lot more trusting of myself. I feel like it's made me an even better astrologer because in mediumship, you really have to be okay with getting a no from who you're reading from. And as somebody who is a recovering perfectionist, hearing those no's sometimes was kind of scary to me. But there's really no time for that if you want to be good at mediumship. So I got over it pretty quickly. And, in turn, it's made me a more confident astrologer because I've just learned to trust myself that I'm right more often than I'm wrong. And it was really validating about a lot of experiences that I had in my life early on where I had just bad feelings. And I have a Libra Venus. So there was this socialization, especially like with my family. And of course, being a girl, I felt like it was mean of me to have like a negative energetic experience with somebody, to just like immediately be like, no, this person is not for me. There's something wrong here. And so there have been a lot of times in my life where I like pushed past that feeling and ended up really regretting it because that initial like quote unquote no reason discomfort ended up being something that I should have listened to and that actually did have meaning. So the other cool kind of unexpected thing that has happened is I've developed a much stronger connection with my ancestors because I've had so many experiences with mediumship, and I've gotten a few readings myself, and then I've read for people, and having this repeat experience of validatable evidence, it really encouraged me to lean into those connections. And, just because they're not physically present with me, that I could build relationships in that way. And that was a very new concept for me in a lot of ways. Like my grandmother, I was very close to. So I think when she passed, I really started exploring this entire thing in a very different way. And I actually think that her passing away did lead me on the road that I'm on now as an astrologer and a developing psychic medium. Loss and grief are really hard things to deal with, but for me, it also opened this really magical door of possibility. And so I thank her for that her death was, it's rough. I miss her all the time, but like I got something really cool out of it, and we still have a very strong connection. And actually in some ways it's easier now because the gunk of like being here on earth and accumulated trauma and like generational differences and personality differences, it's softened a lot now, that she's in spirit, as they say. So I've grown a lot in my understanding of what it means to like have a relationship and what a relationship can look like. And so it's been really cool. And it also helps me talk to clients more. And, a lot of intuitive people come to me and don't even know that they're very intuitive. And every person is intuitive. Like any person, I'm not special because I can do mediumship, right? Like we're all capable of doing mediumship. We're not all capable of becoming professional mediums. That's like, it takes skill, it takes development, and often, money. But my experience has helped me talk to clients that have, similar journeys that they're on, where they're looking into these abilities that they may have and seeing if they want to develop them further. And so that's been a really great benefit to it too. This is a question from Lisette. Is there anything you know now that you wish you'd known when you first started studying astrology? A few things come to mind. I think when I found astrology, I just happened to stumble into a type of astrology and a way of translating astrology that really made sense for me. And so at the time, it felt like I had kind of struck gold, like, oh my God, how could I have found such a gem? And I think my weird journey into astrology happened the way that it happened for a reason, not to be super cliche, but for me, it's pretty hard to find astrology that works for me, that clicks, that feels like it's actually like the good stuff. And for so long, I thought that I couldn't find other good stuff other than what I was being exposed to. And I was looking too, because I was very hungry for as much information. And when I really get into something, I want to read a book, I want to listen to a podcast, I go really into stuff. And I just wasn't finding stuff that was doing it for me, and I love astrology. So it was a real shame because there's a lot of astrology out there. Just like for me, I'm very picky. And so after a while, it started to feel like I wouldn't find other astrology that I was that into. And I wish I could just go back and tell myself that, like, well, one, you're going to make some of the astrology that you're into because it doesn't exist. And two, that there are other astrologers out there that do good astrology, and it may take more time to find who resonates with you, who clicks with you, and that's okay. But I think the important thing is to just like keep being open to different avenues and different perspectives, because just like getting locked in on one person, not the best idea from what I've observed. I think I had more of a scarcity mindset around astrology in the beginning because, like, again, I really hadn't found other astrologers that made sense to me. And so it felt like finding one, I had to like cling to them. But the thing is if you're going to listen to somebody or work with somebody on an individual basis, I feel like it's almost the same as if you're choosing a therapist, in the sense that it needs to be a good fit. And like for me, I don't really want to work with somebody who isn't like somewhat aligned with me energetically. Like if they are somebody that does things that I find awful, I probably am not going to continue to support or work with them. So I would just tell myself that there are a lot of astrologers and, for that matter, mediums or spiritual healers or guides. And you don't have to just like find the one and cling on to them and assume that there's nobody else that's as good as they are just because they say that. And I think when we're doing work that is so personal, we're talking about like the fabric of our lives and our existence. So to me, like, it's very important to choose to follow and support people that are doing good work in the world. And they may not be on every street corner or every FYP, but they're out there. We've got another question from Elena. What are your goals for Petty Astrology and the community you're building? This is one of those questions that the answer is like pages and pages in my notes app because it's like so much. But I'm going to try to condense it in a way that I hope makes sense. But to me, astrology is a tool for human growth and human connection. And that's really like the basis for everything that I'm trying to do. And so with this podcast, I really want to give people things to think about, to question, to consider, because we have a lot evolving right now, especially with Pluto in Aquarius. I mean, it is literally the evolution of humanity, and we're always evolving. But I think Pluto in Aquarius is going to be a very significant period of that human evolution. And we have a lot of evolving to do as quickly as possible. And it's not going to all happen overnight. It's 21 years of Pluto in Aquarius. And unfortunately, change is not always something that happens overnight, but it's going to be happening. And I think it's going to be happening more than we might be comfortable with, because humans tend to be, creatures of comfort. So the things that I'm talking about are to prepare us for the future that we're walking into. Everything that I say on this podcast is intentional, because I am trying to get us ready and get us in a good place to greet this era head on. And I view that as part of my job as an astrologer and doing the kind of astrology that I particularly do. But when we can focus on what matters to us and what really is going to matter to the collective, I personally believe that we all win. So that's what this podcast is about for me. There are most definitely people who think that the things that I talk about on this podcast are weird or just not the kind of astrology that they're looking for, or they're out of line, or they're too extreme, or they're unimportant, or even unhinged. And so the reason that I called it Petty Astrology is because I really can't be concerned about if other people think what I have to say is worthwhile. Because what I'm saying is what I'm seeing come up for the collective. And one of my jobs as an astrologer is to be honest with you guys. Because what is the point of being able to see all this stuff coming if I don't let other people know? To me, this podcast is an act of love for the collective. Really, truly, I get the heart of it. It's my love for the human experience. and what we're doing here together and the potential that we have to make this a better existence, because, it's not always been miserable for everyone the way it is now. Like, these are all choices that were made, and we can make better choices. We have the opportunity to make a massive amount of change with Pluto in Aquarius, and God damn it, I'm ready to take the shot, So for me, this entire podcast, everything about it is about centering our humanity. And, it's funny because one of my very best friends did the art for this podcast, and he threw together a few different options for me without us having too much of a conversation about it. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, that's the one. And he was actually really surprised that that was the one I picked. I think he thought it was like probably going to be my least favorite. But, it's two human hands reaching to touch one another. And so the heart of Petty Astrology, the name is irreverent because I'm irreverent, and I'm kind of doing, punk rock radical astrology here as far as I'm concerned. But all of that punk rock shit to me is about like getting to be an authentic human being, to be a liberated human being, caring about shit that's important, not letting people get fucked over in front of our very eyes, because when we let that happen, that means that we're also at risk. And astrology has really given me a language and a foresight on a lot of this stuff. And honestly, a lot of this stuff I've seen coming even before I was an astrologer, but astrology really confirmed a lot of it. And that's why I've become so vocal. I'm actually a pretty quiet person. Like, I'm chatty for sure. Like, I can have a very long conversation, but I don't typically platform myself in the way that I have. And so I hope that that speaks to my audience about how seriously I take the work that I'm doing, because honestly, there are easier ways that I could be making money. I'm choosing to kind of be poor right now because I see the potential in what I'm building. And I feel that if I can grow this podcast enough to pay my bills, I could put I already put so much into this podcast with very little resources, but I would love to get to a point where I can pay my bills with the Patreon, and I could hire an editor, because that would enable me to make a lot more content for you guys and to really focus on the creation process and the writing and also doing the astrology, because all of the study, all of the charts that I look at, like all of that takes time, and it's harder to do that when you're like editing a bunch of stuff and, promoting yourself on social media and trying to grow and trying to survive, because I'm just like everybody else. And like many people, it's hard out here financially. So I would really love to get to a place where this is sustainable and this is something that I can make even better than it is now. So as this community continues to grow, my hope is that it becomes a place where people that are interested in collective liberation can find each other, can connect, can share resources and support and strategy. Because that is a fundamental aspect of how we're going to move through Pluto in Aquarius. We're going to have to build community. We're going to have to build connections. So I'd like the Petty Astrology community to be one of those places. And I view my work as an astrologer as being in service of this community. And it's, hard for me to work with every single person one-on-one. So the reason that I created the podcast and the Patreon was in part so that I could serve more people. So I kind of view the Petty Astrology community almost like a town, that I'm the astrologer in that town. And so my job is to support the spiritual growth of that particular group of people. A lot of us just happen to live in very different places. But I learn so much from the community around this podcast, and I think we learn a lot from each other. So I really can't say enough how proud I am of the people that have found me, and like that I'm just honored that people trust me and respect what I'm doing and hopefully see the vision, because that's who I really want to be in service of. I want to support people that are here to get free and to help others get free too. That's my work as an astrologer. So the podcast will always be very human-centered. And of course, I want it to be entertaining because I do think that as we move forward in Pluto and Aquarius, it is really important that we have culture that is more reflective of our values. And I think we could do a lot better than what we have right now. And I think really good media can help us imagine a better future for ourselves and really facilitate the possibility. Our last question today is from Jamie. If you could pick one character from a book or a movie to be, who would it be and why? Okay, so this was actually the hardest question for me to think of an answer to, and I was really turning it over in my head for whatever reason. And also Mercury is retrograde now, so, I can't be faulted for my brain not being at optimum levels at the moment. This is not quite an answer to your question, but my friends jokingly call me Jigsaw. And if you're not familiar with the Saw franchise, Jigsaw is the creepy doll villain that rides a tricycle, but is actually like an angry guy. But let's just focus on the doll that rides the tricycle. Essentially, he is a mastermind of all these fucked up games in the Saw franchise. And I am not a serial killer or criminal mastermind, but my friends think it's really funny because they see the weird shit that comes out of my brain and they're like, it's kind of twisted how you just thought of that really quickly. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm a writer, so like being able to think of really bizarre things is just like a skill that I have. And that includes, twisted Saw shit too. But when you look at the way my Scorpio Mercury is set up, it kind of makes sense. So, I want to thank my patrons for submitting so many thoughtful questions. This was really fun, and I hope you guys enjoyed it too. So the big headline this week is Mars approaching Jupiter in Gemini. And so this transit goes exact, which means Mars will finally meet up exactly with Jupiter in the sky on the 14th of August. But this next week is the build up to that. So this is going to be the energy that's just kind of humming along and building up. Of course, we have all of these other transits going on as well. But this is a transit that we get roughly every 2 years, Mars conjunct Jupiter. But, this time it just so happens it's happening in Gemini. So part of the reason we might be hearing about this transit is because it's just not something that happens all the time. But the other part of it is that the energies involved here on a mundane level, meaning if we're looking at the energy that is impacting us globally, this is a transit that will probably see violence. And that doesn't mean that violence is going to be happening to you or around you necessarily, because again, this is a transit that impacts the entire planet that we live on. So it's not like everywhere is going to be violent, but what it means is that we're probably going to see a lot more violent events happening. And so the first thing that came to mind when I was looking at this chart was the violence that is happening against immigrants, particularly Muslims, in the UK. And I am not a mundane astrologer, which means I don't make these like in-depth predictions about what this is going to look like. But because that's in my head right now and I'm looking at the energy, it just was standing out to me. So it's also like I could see us having a school shooting or something like that. And I really hope to be wrong on those things. But the reason that I'm saying anything to you guys at all about this is because I think it just helps to prepare a little bit mentally for the kinds of headlines that we might be hearing about as we live our lives. I don't ever say this stuff so that you hole up in your home and don't leave the house, or to stress you out or to make you feel bad. But if I see something, I'm gonna mention it. But zooming in on a more personal level, This is going to be increased mental activity for all of us. I could see us having very busy minds, and of course, Mercury is retrograde. We've got Venus in Virgo. It's a just very mental, energetic weather, so to speak. And so I really want people to watch their overthinking. I want to watch how we speak to one another, because this energy with the Mars conjunct Jupiter is definitely giving like people popping off. And so lots of room for that to get all tangled up with the weather we have going on right now. We might see people acting more risky with this energy. I see a lot of people being impulsive, and being impulsive to me is not always a bad thing. There's good instances of being impulsive and there's bad instances of being impulsive. And so, just keep an eye on that. Just know that that's in the air and, act accordingly. I would definitely think before you do anything that's major. And of course, we're in Mercury retrograde. It's not like the best time to impulsively do something brand new, start a new project, take a new journey. And, even if you do those things, I'm not saying that they're like doomed or anything, but notoriously Mercury retrograde is not the best time to start things. It's really about attending to the stuff we already kind of got going on. So the other thing with this energy, it may be pretty restless. Like you might just be really mentally active or just feel like you really want to get up and move. And so if you are feeling mentally restless or physically restless, do move your body. Get some of that energy physically moving. And then if it's on a more mental level, I am a really big fan of making lists of things so that you're not just like repeating what you need to do over and over so you don't forget it. Or also if you're just like turning thoughts over in your head and it's not productive, I like to write that stuff out, or you can do like speak it into a voice note, whatever it is, whatever works for you, to just kind of get it out of that spinning in your head, because that's just not the most healthy thing after a while. Don't overthink. Another thing I want everyone to do is definitely be careful driving this week. With everything going on, I can see a lot of opportunities for road rage and just people driving like shit, which they do that sometimes. So, be on your defensive driving shit. If you're a pedestrian, look both ways before crossing the street. We've got enough going on. We can, do our basic safety stuff and just not be careless during this transit. If you're communicating with people, do ask questions. Be curious about things instead of assuming. If you can have a nice, pleasant conversation with somebody, that's always a plus. We can learn a lot from pleasant, easy conversations with a lot of respectful communication. And of course, if there's stuff that you're curious about, or there's projects that you're working on, or things that you're researching or exploring or discussing, this can be a really good time to lean into that and have some confidence about it. Really, really go with the energy. You do not have to rush through things. It might feel like it at times with this energy because it is kind of a quick energy, but really, even if it might feel urgent, it's probably not. So just remember, just because it feels like, oh, I got to do it right now, that might not actually be the case. And, don't be afraid to take your time with things, because with Mars conjunct Jupiter, you really can get some good stuff accomplished during this transit. So think about moving yourself closer to your long-term goals when things come up. Build yourself up instead of deciding that things are too hard or frustrating. And follow where the energy is moving you to put your focus. So instead of like, I have all these things to do, I'm going to focus on the thing that I hate the most. Don't do that. Focus on the thing that is more exciting. Obviously, I know deadlines are a thing, so, you got to do what you got to do. But if you don't have to do something urgently and you can lean into the things that actually feel better to do, that will probably be the best bet for this energy. You might find yourself wanting to kind of expand on things that you're working on and make them into bigger things. And I would just focus on the things and the options that move you forward in a way that's most interesting to you. You might find during this transit that you have to make some changes to do that. So don't be afraid of things needing to go in a different direction than maybe you had initially planned. And use your discernment. Trust the authority of your inner guidance and what feels right. And don't force things out of fear or like a need to do what other people think you should be doing, because that will create resistance in a way that's not really going to be super helpful with this energy. And you might find if you embrace those possibilities and those potential changes that you might discover along the way, you come up with some really interesting ideas or solutions to issues that come up during this transit. So again, we're having Mars move towards Jupiter this entire next week. With that, I'm going to give us a little bit of a heads up on some of the things that we can look out for this week. And of course, it's not that we're all going to have the same experience, because we all have our own individual charts, meaning that the energy might be the same energy we're dealing with, but we're all dealing with that energy in our individual ways. So with that, the day that this podcast comes out is August 7th. And, we start the day off with the moon in Virgo, and then it's going to move into Libra. This is a day that I could see having the potential to have a sort of anxious energy, so we definitely want to continue to watch that overthinking. Thursday, August 8th, is another day where it could be, really in your feelings, potentially. And hopefully those are good feelings. Hopefully there's some levity there, despite whatever is happening in the outside world. So have something to look forward to this Thursday. One of the things that I really love about the Astro Den, which is the Discord community that I host with Mackenzie Wollenzine and Jen Russell, two wonderful astrologers that are frequent guests on this podcast. But in the Astro Den, people like to compare notes about their observations of the energy. And so that's a good place if you're looking to get more insight on how other people experience the same energy. So if you're a member of my Patreon or Mackenzie's Patreon or Jen's Patreon, you get access to that community and we can talk a lot more about this astrology. Friday, August 9th. That's a day that feels a lot more active and expansive to me, so it might be a good day to make some fun plans. I'm just going to caution, do be safe when you make those plans. Be cautious. Right now, we have about 1 million people in the United States contracting a COVID infection every single day right now. Like, the numbers are scary high. So definitely have fun, but try to have fun in a way that takes care of your health and the health of the people around you. Wear an N95 or a KN95 mask. Open windows if you can to make sure there's good airflow and ventilation. If you have air purifiers, you should be using those, because I can't think of anything less fun than getting sick right now. I don't want it, and I don't want it for you guys either. Saturday, August 10th is a little bit more introspective energy. It's a little bit more moody, so it might be a good day to do an emotional check-in with yourself. Get some self-care in. Maybe do some grounding. And if you're feeling creative, I would definitely lean into that. Sunday, August 11th is also a little bit lighter. Go with the flow energy, but this can be a good day, get your chores done, get yourself prepped for the week. And if you're still feeling creative, absolutely keep that part of the weekend going. August 12th, Monday. Hate to say it, it's Giving Monday. It's Giving Monday. So make the most of it. It can actually be a really good day to get your ducks in a row, so to speak. So, focus there and not on any sense of doom or restriction that might be overtaking you. Don't give in to the Monday doom thoughts. Tuesday, August 13th. Again, the Mars-Jupiter conjunction is moving closer and closer this entire week. So this is the day before that conjunction finally meets up. So we might be feeling some of that intensity, but Tuesday is a little bit lighter. We might be making some interesting choices that day, and it can be very productive if you put your focus on things that feel like you could learn something from them or expand on something in a way that's interesting to you. So overall, this is going to be a very fascinating week to observe. And again, if you are interested in talking about this stuff and sharing your observations, sharing your notes, The Astro Den Discord community is a great place to do that, and I'll put the Patreon link in the show notes, so if you'd like to join us there, you absolutely can. This week definitely has the potential to be a very creative, very productive week. So, if there's some tension involved, we're going to breathe through it, we're going to move through it, and we're going to get through it, I promise. That's it for this week's episode of Petty Astrology. Next week, we are doing the final episode in our Sister Sign series. We're talking about Leo and Aquarius energy, so I'm very much looking forward to that. If you'd like to submit suggestions for future episode topics, you can do so by becoming a free member of my Patreon. We have a submission form in there. And you also get access to Petty Digest, which is my new newsletter. The link for that will be in the show notes. This podcast is made possible by my sponsors over on Patreon.